What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, the official Cliffy J, and I'm back with another video. And today, I'm be giving you guys my Survivor 49 postseason power ranking. And this list is mostly based off of the game they played on this season. Of course, we're not saying them overall as players, because the list would likely be drastically different. Y'all know me. I don't just put the winner at one, and I don't just put the first boot at the last position. But let's go ahead and get into the list. When I'm saying the criteria and I'm saying based off the game they played, I'm looking at their social game first, then I'm looking at their agency they had in the game, their strategic approach, then their physical ability, and I'll kind of look at that all with the eye test and decide on where I would rank the players. But those are the main parameters I'm looking at: social, agency, strategic approach, and then physical. So let's go ahead and get into the list. And at number 18, I've got the first boot in Nicole. She didn't really, she wasn't able to show any of her skill set. So I can't really rank her highly just looking at that. On top of the fact that she obviously was the first boot. And while she was there, she was throwing up. She didn't really have the best reactions to the environment, I would say, and then spitting on faces. Like, it was just kind of cringy. And she didn't really provide anything of substance to make me think that she's even a serviceable player. And at number 17, I've got Annie. She was also an extremely early boot. And she really, as I said, like, had no leverage in the game. She didn't really have any true allies. Alex definitely wanted to work with her, but she also targeted Alex for a week, or at least threw Alex's name out there. And it just never would have made sense for anyone to actually work with her. So yeah, she was outside of the majority. She squandered any chance she had of possibly having a flip or anything like that, I would say. And she was a bit delusional. And at number 16, I've got Jeremiah. He was essentially collateral damage once Alex was safe, and he was never able to escape that. And that's really what it comes down to, because at that point when it was just those three left, he did have Sophie. Sophie would have had his back if it was just those three going to tribal with no advantages and no other reason to, vote for each other, obviously. And Sophie was obviously also able to outplay him in this round. That's why she survived. So it's kind of hard to rank someone that kind of was screwed over by the situation more than just their ability, because it is possible that, if Jake is there, Sophie could maybe convince Jake, but Jake and Alex were also extremely close. So I can't really rank Jeremiah highly, because I don't know if he would have survived regardless, because technically he was the fourth out of that four-person majority. And at number 15, I've got Matt. And I really did want to have Matt higher, because I don't think he really provided anything necessarily bad. He just was in the minority, and he kind of exposed his intelligence to the tribe, especially Savannah picked up on it and saw him as a massive threat, and they were able to make that move. So like I said, it's more of a minority thing. That's kind of why he got sent home, and that's why I got him this high, because he wasn't all the way on the minority on his original tribe. So yeah. And at number 14, I've got Shannon. Um, I just think she's an overplayer. She overplayed. She exposed her hand throughout the swaps, and that's what it comes down to. You tried to swift flip on Juwan. You were really just throwing Sage all under the bus, running her over with it, but she did have a really solid position. She was seemingly Savannah's number one ally. So I do think a lot of credit needs to be given to her for that, her early game positioning. And I will say this: I value early game positioning a lot, because you don't make it deep in the game if you don't have early game positioning a lot of the time. It's hard to just survive the pre-merge if you don't have allies. I think that is the basis of having a solid social game and being someone that people actually like and having the likability factor. So early social game is just as, if not more important than late social game, because a player can just become a huge threat and their social game kind of just goes out the window, and that's situational a lot of the time. And at number 13, I've got Jason. And I feel like I could have had him higher, but it's very similar to Matt. He was swap screwed. He didn't really have a chance. And he also didn't make it, like, Savannah and the other players knew he was just gonna go right back to work with his original tribe, like without a shadow of a doubt, which, it's not bad to go and work with your originals. Like that's valuable to your game. At the same time, you also gotta, do a little better. I'll give him the credit for surviving over Matt, but he also would have been the target if Matt didn't expose his intelligence. So I think that it's also some negative there too, for sure. And I think that he is just a little bit more strategically savvy. I think that he would have been a little better than someone like Matt, but that's all kind of just presumptions. And at number 12, I've got Alex. He was caught playing the middle. Early game, he was in a relatively good position, being close to Jake and having the alliance with Jake and Sophie, but and he was throwing his name out there. When they got to the final three on the tribe, he wouldn't have had the numbers if it wasn't for advantages. And he's someone that was literally caught playing both sides by majority of the tribe, and especially Rizzo was able to call that out. And it's not really much credit I can give him, except for the fact that I know he is a strategic threat. He's very much a player that's going to play hard, and I think credit needs to be given there. And he played good enough socially to survive after he had gotten to the merge, where him and Sophie were technically easy targets, and they didn't make those moves. And I think that could also be a testament to his social game in some regards. And at number 11, I've got MC. And I know that it's kind of crazy to have someone that made all these people that are at the merge that I have this far, like down the list. I could see an argument for them being higher just because of how far they made it. But I'm looking at their overall ability and like eye test. And I think that MC was a huge threat just based off her archetype, her physique, and as intelligent as she comes off. But I also think that she went home because of her own stupidity in terms of the fact that her mouth is just too big. Like, I think that she gave away information that she probably shouldn't have throughout the game, which also grew distrust between her Yellow Tribe members, and I think that that is the main reason she was sent home. And that's why I have her this low, because I do think that she has a decent social ability, of course, and she's physical, but she didn't really have a significant amount of agency throughout the game. And she also made some strategic blunders. And at number 9, I've got Christina. And Christina is just someone that I don't really know where to really assess her and her ability. I think that she was clearly good enough socially to be in the majority on her original tribe. And that's really it. But she made it so far. And I do think that she's also a player that's not just going to roll over and let herself go home. She's going to play the active strategy aspect of the game. And I think that there is some validity to her having a good social game and being likable. So I'm going to go ahead and have her at number 9, but she could definitely be lower on the list. I could see a lot of spots being swapped out and swapped around. I know this is going to sound crazy, but at number 8, I've got Jake. Like, I know this is insane for me to have him at number 8. I think that he was likable, very solid physically. We can't really talk much about agency and all that, even though he was in the best position and arguably had the most agency out of the pre-merge players in general. Like, in terms of an individual, he was such greatly positioned, and he was, obviously big in the decision making on those initial tribals. So I don't really know, what else I'm really supposed to say here. He got medevac. Like, bro probably would have had a dominant game, but he got medevac, so I can't really overglaze it and put him super high. But I will also say this shows the low caliber of game players on this cast, in my opinion. That a pre-merge medevac is able to be at number 8. And at number 7, I've got Nate. And I know this is crazy to have Nate this high, just like I got Jake this high. And I'll be honest, I just had to re-record this part of my list because I had Nate at number 4. I'm gonna just be real, because they're really bad on this cast, and I really I really believe that. And I'm just preferencing you guys for some later information when I talk later in the video, because I'm not gonna go re-record that part. But I'm gonna go ahead and actually have Nate at number 7. I think that his pre-merge positioning was really good. He was a big decision maker early in the game, and he was taken out mainly because the other players, Rizzo had an advantage, and they assumed that Rizzo would use the advantage on Savannah or himself, and that's mainly why it was on him. I don't necessarily think that he was unliked by the cast, more like a Savannah. So, yeah, that's really what it is. And everyone else that's below him on the list literally played worse than he did. And I don't really think that's a debate. The other players that are higher, I think that there's an argument they played better, and that's why I'm going to respect their as far as they made in the game, because obviously everyone else made it further in the game, and they have positives to their game too. Whereas he also has the negative of the fact that he lied to his post swap group, and that grew some distrust there, but he was never going to be in a good position. So I don't really discredit him much for that. And at number 6, I've got Yellow Sophie. I really debated between these two, and I could definitely see the argument for Sophie being lower than Nate. I think that Sophie is a worse player than Nate, just as a game player, for sure. But I think that when we just look at the game that was played on the season, though she was outside of the majority pre-merge, she did have MC, someone that wanted to work with her and was giving her some valuable information. She was obviously able to ingrain herself into the group at least somewhat during the swap. That's why they didn't care about, like, all right, let's just get her out and then work with these other players. And she also had a good enough relationship with Sage to where Sage was giving her information about MC that was detrimental to Sage's game. So I will give Sophie all of that credit. And she was very good in competitions. So that's why I have her this high. But I also think that she's just a bad decision maker. She overplayed her hand. She didn't have a very good gauge on what was going on. She didn't have an exceptional social game. That's why she was not ever really positioned that great. And she also was attempting to be the fourth wheel of a three-person alliance and then flip back the other way, which didn't make sense. It would have made more sense to take out Savannah and then go after Jawan, because people probably would have been more on board because he would have had so much dominance. But she didn't know how to think ahead. She didn't know how to use her brain. And that's just what it comes down to. And that's why I got her at this position. And at number 5, I've got Jawan. Jawan obviously was in a terrible position pre-merge. There's no doubt about that. And that's a big reason that I have him this low. He could be higher based off his merge agency, but I don't think he was making the greatest decisions. And this is where you really can see the low level of gameplay, because someone that was viewed as a threat, someone that made moves in the game, someone that had agency, someone that is a relatively well-rounded player themselves, is not that good in my opinion. And that's really what it comes down to. Um, Obviously he should have went for Sophie over MC. Obviously he should have went for anybody in that three-person alliance, Sophie, well, Soph, Savannah, or Rizzo over Alex. This is just what he should have done, and he put himself in a position where he became the easier target because he had a lot of equity at that point, right? When you have too much equity this early in the game and you're not an exceptional social player, of course you're going to get sniped. It usually happens like that. Though I think that taking him out was a bad decision, he could have prevented that by getting rid of Sophie instead of MC when Sophie was targeting him. You're an idiot. And I somehow forgot while I was doing the video, I skipped over Steven, which is odd. I fully recorded the video and I forgot to put him in. So I'm going to go ahead and do it now. And you guys won't really be able to tell as much, but I am letting you guys know because it's going to sound a little off. So let's go ahead and go into Steven, and then I'll get into number 4. Steven falls at number 5 technically. And I got Steven here because I do believe that for majority of the game, he was in a really good position. He was in a good position on early Hina. He was also in a pretty solid position when he got to the merge because he was aligned with so many players. And even during the swap, he was also able to be aligned with players. He never was really in a bad position. He always had allies. He was solid in competitions. And I think he was someone that usually made consistently pretty much correct moves, had decent reads. It's just the fact that he wasn't able to keep his threat level low enough to where players got rid of him when it was just against their best interest. I would argue that was against Sage and Christina's best interest. So yeah, that's why I got him at this point. I think that he could have definitely pitched himself, sold himself a little better, and probably wouldn't have went home when he did because let's be real, they're leaving a trio in the game. But at the same time, he played such a good game before that, and I think he was arguably the most consistent player of the entire season. And at number 4, I got Sage. And I have Sage slightly ahead of Jawan because basically at every step, I'd say she had a slight leg up over him. They jammed in more and more that she was extremely disliked. I mean, that he was extremely disliked pre merge. She also wasn't liked by her pre merge tribe. But if we look at both of them traversing the swap, he was kind of afforded the better position because they had the overwhelming majority, and then Sophie just hopped right in with them. Versus, she was more in a position where Shannon was just dogging her, throwing her under the bus, and she had to kind of gain more social capital and have more allies, which actually helped her as it came to the merge, and why she actually had a more impressive merge game than him because she was just better positioned with those yellow tribe players. And I also think she did make bad decisions, obviously, along with Jawan. Um, yeah, and that's really what it comes down to. I think that also decision making and the votes that they decided to make put them in a position that they were to where they lost agency. Going after Rizzo, Savannah, and Soph would have just been the best way to go about stuff, and they made it counterproductive by, I guess, trying to flip back and forth and made it seem like you guys are going to work with the other tribe players, and then just turns around like the games didn't make that much sense, and I could see where she lost the jury vote because her game wasn't very cohesive. You know, it didn't really make as much sense as a Soph's game or a Savannah's game that was a little bit more straightforward. And at number 3, I've got Savannah. Physically dominant, very good in challenges, of course. I also think the competition wasn't that strong. But she also benefited from others' mistakes. That's one of the reasons I'm a little bit lower on her. And she had low social capital despite having strong positioning. And I'll credit her for the positioning. And that makes me know that she had at least a semblance of a social, a remembrance. I don't know what word I'm supposed to be saying. She had a social game, at least with the players she was playing with, which is extremely important. And that's a big reason that I glaze someone like Xavier is how is your positioning with the players that you're actually planning on going with? And she had that down packed, but she didn't have the greatest social game outside of that. And that's really my only true gripe comparison wise to everyone else. It's a couple other things I would say if we're ranking her overall in comparison to the other winners of the new era or the best players of the new era. But if I'm just saying this cast, I do believe she played the third best game. She was able to get to the end and get the jury vote, and in a pretty decisive jury vote. On top of the fact that she won so many challenges and she was a big player in a lot of the moves, she had a lot of agency throughout the game. And at number 2, I've got Rizzo. And after looking at all this, I'm a little bit lower on Rizzo's game than I was before. I think that him and Savannah, in terms of agency, worked pretty much lockstep. You could argue that she definitely had more agency, actually, though he was kind of bigger on decision making during the merge section, not throughout the entire game. Um, he was a very boisterous player. I really liked the way that he bluffed his idol, but I also think that's extremely risky. But it did work out for him on this game. Is just the fact that bro has no clutch gene. Bro has zero clutch gene, no ability to win challenges, and no ability to win when he needs to. And that really does hamper his game when you compare him to Soph and Savannah, two people that literally won when they needed to, it felt like. Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to. I think that he was a very solid social player, had good alliances. Him and Savannah were very close. Him and Soph were close. Him and Nate were close. Him and Jawan actually had a good relationship for a majority of the game until, it came to flipping. Um, so yeah, and I think that, his contribution to the Alex move, like I said, him also bluffing his idol consistently, him just overall being a really strong, active player, I think is why I got him this high. I just don't think he really had as much. I don't think that Savannah and Rizzo had great social games. I think that he lacked respect. I think it seemed like he wouldn't have won a jury vote next to those ladies. And that does matter if we're looking at his social game overall, because I think respect is a part of social game. And I also think that when you just strip everything back, you see that strategically him and Savannah worked more in lockstep rather than him being like a super dominant player because she also had a lot of agency. And then this cast was really bad. And they were in the minority partly because they made it so obvious that they was, all working together. And that definitely does put a hamper on their strategic ability for me personally. So yeah, that's why I got Rizzo at number 2. And at number 1, I've got Blue Sophie, Soph. Um, I just think that Soph played the best overall game. If we're looking at socially, I think without a doubt, she had the most consistent social game, greatly positioned early game, kind of screwed over by Medivac, and still was able to patch that up with her strategic ability. Aligned herself with power players when she got to the swap in a position where they definitely didn't have to align with her. She was the only one from the tribe, could have been an easy vote. Um, and I think that she just played when she needed to. I think she wasn't someone that was overly aggressive like a Savannah or even a Rizzo in terms of gameplay. I think that she's also someone that won when she needed to, as we saw, and she wasn't bad in challenges overall. On top of the fact that I just can't name as many flaws with her game as I can with theirs. Yeah, we can criticize her for not making the move this time, but someone like Savannah just probably shouldn't have beat her at the end. She clearly had a worse social game, and she was winning challenges to survive. But I don't necessarily think that that should translate to you winning the jury vote. My personal opinion, I think that that's actually negative to your ability. I think that means that you would have went home if you didn't win these challenges. The challenges are very circumstantial. Uh, so yeah, that's really what it comes down to. Um, I think Savannah and Rizzo are both solid players. I just prefer Sophie's gameplay style, and I think that I think her style put her in a position that's why she was like never really targeted, and I think that's more impressive. They were always looked at her, man, that duo, we got to get that duo. People were more like, hey, let's bring Soph in to go against them, stuff like that. So that's kind of why I got her this high positioning. Overall agency, if we say the overall games, I think they had more agency late game, of course. And then decision making, she won when she needed to. She has every quality that I'm looking for when I'm looking at a great winner. I don't usually lean towards the dominant winners because I think being dominant is dangerous. Now, the best players that were able to pull off extremely dominant strategies end up being at the highest level of gameplay for me. Um, but when you're sloppily dominating, like I think that Rizzo and Savannah are more dominant personalities, more dominant players in that way. But they were more sloppy in terms of their gameplay, which was why they were targeted as much as they were, in my opinion. And yeah, gotta have Sophie, Blue Sophie, Soph at number 1. And that is the end of today's video, guys. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Push the notification bell so you can be notified every time I drop a new lit banger. Peace.